Hello and welcome to the Addicts Anonymous podcast. I'm your host, Jim Rochelle's. Today is episode 247, and we're going to be interviewing Sabrina. How you doing, Sabrina?
I'm good, thank you.
You happy to be here? Ready to do this?
A little nervous and anxious, I'm not gonna lie, but it's all good.
And that's normal. I remember my first episode. I was sitting there like, what am I going to talk about? What questions do I ask? You know what I mean? So I understand being nervous, and I still get nervous every time. It's
Yeah,
one of those
but
things.
it's one of those things that I'm not doing it for everybody. I'm doing it for me, and if I can help one person out there, then so be it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So let's get started here. Same question I ask everybody in the beginning is tell me about your childhood and growing up.
Oh wow.
And
I
take your
had it.
time.
Yeah, sure. I had it pretty made. I mean, I grew up in a mom and dad family household, family of four. I had a sister, or have a sister. She's younger than me, but very we're Germans, so it was a very strict household. Um, my dad worked, my mom stayed home. Um, First language was German, learned English in school, was born in Ontario. Um, but it was always, we were seen and not heard kind of kids. Um, I don't know, like I guess, my parents weren't from Canada, they were from Germany. So they moved to Canada and we didn't really have any family here. Um, so we were constantly, hanging out with friends on the weekends, and my parents were always entertaining. And then they got the notion that they wanted to move to the States, to Florida. Um, because my mom had serious back problems, constant bulging discs, herniated discs, fusions. I remember always coming home from work or school, and my mom was laid up on the couch like she couldn't move and stuff. And dad always was working. I mean, he worked 6 days a week. Um, but they tried to move to Florida because we had a condo in Florida, and they always constantly um, took us on trips to Florida to spend our time, most of the times there growing up. I don't remember a lot of my childhood, I'll be honest.
Black
But
Bra.
I do remember one time I refused. I was going into high school and I was like, I'm not going to Florida for 2 weeks. There's no way. I want to stay home, hang with my friends, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, okay, cool. My sister was like, yeah, I want to be like my older sister and stay home. And my parents were like, okay, that's fine. Sabrina, you're staying home. You're looking after your sister while we go to Florida for 2 weeks. I was 14 at the time and my sister was 10. So
Big
they left.
responsibility.
Yeah. So they left. They left me to look after her for 2 weeks. And being in a strict household, we weren't allowed to do anything really. Um, Uh, so they left. Wow, we were on our own for 2 weeks. Awesome. We could do whatever we wanted, you know. So there was this guy I liked, and he had a brother that my sister liked. So we had them come over, hang out and whatever. And nothing really happened. We just hung out because we were kids back then. They left. My parents came home and they were like, oh, we know you had people over. And we're like, well, how is that possible? There's no way you guys were gone. And oh, well, we had the neighbors check on you. So now, having that freedom for 2 weeks, now we're back into this strict household. And that's when I started like questioning. I don't understand, why I have to, listen to you and your rules, because I mean, shit, I was off for, on my own for two weeks. Time goes by and still going to Florida, we go to Florida and whatnot. And I turned 16, and I remember my parents were really close with the neighbors, and they had built a gate in the fence because the neighbors had a pool. So every weekend we would have pool parties and stuff. And that's when I started drinking with them, my parents. They would give me a cooler, hey, it's the cool thing to do, here, sit with us and have a drink. Never really thought anything of it. Um, time goes by, and they decide they put the house up for sale. They want to sell it because we're now moving to Florida, or so we thought. Anyways, in the meantime, I got shipped off to a family, and my sister got shipped off to a family of friends, 2 different ones, so they could pack up the house and get ready to move. And that fell through. So I was like at these people's house for probably a month, and I really didn't have any rules and regulations there either, so I could come and go as I pleased. So then they ended up buying a condo in Canada, in our hometown, and so we went from a 4-bedroom house to a 2-bedroom condo, so I had to share a room with my sister. So now I'm, in high school, I'm getting to the end of high school, and this is a real, it's hard, right? So I hang out with all these friends, and we start drinking and going to parties. And living in Toronto, I ended up starting at the raves and picking up on drugs real bad.
What was the first age you ever used anything at all?
What was the first date? Oh, I don't even remember. I know I was 16 and I started drinking with my parents, alcohol.
Okay. Like heavy drinking with
And
your parents?
no, just like 1 or 2 here and there. But then the legal age here is 19. But we ended up, people get fake IDs and stuff, and you sneak into the clubs or whatever. I remember going to the clubs. We would always pre-drink. It was always on Friday, pre-drink, and then go to the clubs and then drink some more. So for me, it was never 1 or 2. It was like by the time we got to the club, I was already intoxicated big time. And it's funny because I was just talking with my sister about this. She's my best friend, who is more like a sister to me than my biological sister. And she lives with me. But I could never have just 1 drink. It was always 1 led to 2, led to, 20, and 20 was never enough. I was always intoxicated, like to the point. I remember being in a car coming home and hanging my head out the window and puking. Like, that's how bad it was. And then it turned into going to the raves, where Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday was the after party. So I was high for like 4 days. I remember being 19 and doing that. And I remember my first time going to a rave and doing that 1 hit of ecstasy ever in my life. And it's always constantly like you want to chase that first high because you can never get it back, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I always say I came up with a sentence along the lines of, we always try to get that first high we so often romanticized after using it.
Well, it's a form of euphoria, escapism, right? And I
Oh,
chose, yeah, I was always a black sheep of the family. I stood up for myself. I was confident. I didn't care what people thought. I didn't care what my parents thought, because heck, I was left at 14, on my own. My mom and I really did not see eye to eye. My father, I was a daddy's girl. You didn't really hear much from my dad. It was, when he was mad, it was, I'm disappointed in you, kind of thing. And again, we were kind of the seen and not heard kids, right? You had to, like, I remember going to church on Sundays, and I hated it because I didn't understand it as a kid, and as I got older, I didn't believe in it, and my mom always tried to dress me up in a dress, and I hated it, and pantyhose and shit like that, and I was always a tomboy. I was always out in the yard with my dad, playing in the muck with the trucks and stuff, and because he was a bricklayer. Um, and my sister was always inside playing Barbies and hanging out with my mom. Um, so for me, it was I needed to use substance in order to escape home life, if that makes sense. Um,
Yeah, of course. That's a very common reason to try to numb yourself from the situation that you're in.
right. I was like, kind of like, fuck you, I'm doing my own shit. I'm not gonna, listen to what you have to tell me. I mean, and then as I got older, I think I was 18, I finally moved out of the house. I was like, I can't do this anymore. My mom, like, I would come home high from a rave, and my parents would be getting ready for church, excuse me, and they would say, "Oh, I didn't know the bar closed this early, like late in the morning or whatever." But meanwhile, they had no clue. Um, Funny story. I moved out, and then my grandmother from Germany came to visit one time, and she wanted to see my apartment. And I had just come home from a rave, so I was higher than a kite. And I was like, "Oh God, okay, whatever." So mom and my grandmother come over, and my grandmother turns to my mom and she says, "Do you know your daughter is high right now on drugs?" My mom's like, "No way, there's no way." And my grandmother's like, "Yeah, right." Being in Germany, it was a big thing too, right? Um, and she's like, "No way, there's no way." Well, finally, I just came clean and I said, "Yeah, mom, right now I'm high. I was at a rave last night. I'm I'm just, coming down from being high." And she's like, "Oh my God, and I can't believe you," and blah blah. I'm thinking, well, all these years I've been doing it. I'm coming home higher than a kite and you haven't clued in. Like, you really are naive, to everything. Um Anyways, I continued that for the rave scene for, I was like, oh gosh, 18, 19, until I was 23. I remember this distinctly. I We went to a rave, a buddy of mine, and came home somehow. I don't even know how. I drove my car. Um, I drove him home, which was an hour away from my house. So from Toronto, it took an hour to drive to his place, then an hour back to my place. And I woke up the next morning and I was thinking, how the hell did I get, how the hell am I in my bed? I look out the window and I'm like, how the hell did I get my car home? And I was 23 at the time, and I was like, holy shit, like I drove home and I don't even remember. And at that point, I was like, I'm done. I'm done with this because I want to live to see the next day. I want to have kids. I want to get married. I want to have a career. I want to have a house, the whole thing, the whole 9 yards.
And it shows how selfish we are because we're not even thinking about the other people we can kill.
Right, exactly. So at that time, this was a newer apartment that I had moved into, and so I was living on the main floor, and there was a basement apartment, and I met a guy who lived downstairs. Turns out he ended up being my partner, and all we did was drink. Like, I remember drinking a bottle of tequila and us eating the worm at the end. And then we went out for a walk and we were stumbling all over the place, and then ended up somehow home and making peanut butter sandwiches and putting the worm with the peanut butter sandwich. Like, it was just crazy stuff we did. Anyways, with him, I ended up, and he was an alcohol, or still is an alcoholic as well. Um, but at the time, we didn't really think that we were alcoholics. We were just like, oh yeah, we're having fun, we're partying, we're young, stupid, in love at the time. Um, I ended up getting pregnant with my first son. So then I quit drinking. Like, I went through college, got my early childhood education degree, and as soon as I found out I was pregnant, I stopped drinking. Um, had my had my first son, and
I always found that amazing that a lot of people I talked to, the second they found out they were pregnant, they were able to quit.
well,
That's
I
that's
mean,
impressive to me.
well, I've never been pregnant before, right? Didn't know that you could have one or two drinks while you're pregnant. I wanted to be strictly clean and clear for this baby, right? Um, so I had my first son, Kelso, July 18th. I talked to my dad on the phone because at the time they had moved to Newfoundland, and I was still living in Ontario. I talked to him on the 19th and he congratulated me and, oh, excited because he has a grandson. And my mom called me a couple days later, freaking out. Oh, your dad's not home. I don't know where he is. And I said, oh, mom, it's okay. Um, he's probably out, just looking for work because Newfoundland it was at the time very scarce for work for what he did in his line of job. Um, and she was like, okay, no problem, you know. Um, a day later, so July 24th. Yeah, that was the 24th. The 25th, she calls and they did a helicopter search and they found my father who had committed suicide that day.
I'm sorry to
Um,
hear that.
thank you. That day ended up being 7 days after my first boy was born, on their wedding anniversary, 5 days before his birthday. So he had already had it planned and whatnot. So here I am with now a 9-day-old baby flying to Newfoundland. Um, I ended up there staying with my mom for 2 weeks with my boy, just because I was the strong one of the family, looked after everything. Anyways, fast forward, I had a second child with the same man, and he ended up drinking and now smoking weed with the neighbor next door. And I just couldn't handle it anymore. I was like, I'm done. It's either you clean up or we're separating. I'm going on my own. Well, it was the latter. I ended up on my own with these two boys who are 15 months apart. And they were still like, Tulsa was 18 months and Ethan was 9 months, little babies. So I'm on my own. So trying to get through life, and it was just tough being a single mom. I ended up in court fighting for sole custody of my boys for 2 years. I ended up getting sole custody. In the meantime, I mean, drinking wasn't a huge thing, but I still drank with people every now and again. And, when I could, when the kids went to their dads, I'd drink or whatever. Never really thought much of it. Anyways, met a man online in Nova Scotia and I end up moving here. This was in 2006. Um, Ended up getting pregnant, having a daughter, nearly lost her. But then I noticed, like, we were together for 9 years, married 5 years. We got married. And I remember my wedding day. It was in the morning. And if I'm jumping all around, I do apologize.
No, I'm listening. I'm
Okay.
listening.
I'm all over the place. But I remember our wedding day specifically because it was a morning wedding and we had it at the fire hall. And I just kept drinking. Like, I got drunk on our wedding day. And he was like, "What are you doing? It's like 11 in the morning." I'm like, "Oh, so there's a bar." He goes, "It's not open bar." I'm like, "Oh, good. Well, then you can pay for it." Like, it just, like, when I rehash things, it blows my mind. Like, you know, um, anyways, I was the one always drinking. I went out on the weekends with the girls. And anyway, he ended up going out west to work, and things just, I was a married single woman. I just couldn't handle it anymore. I was like, this is ridiculous. What's the point in me being married if you're never home? The first year he was out there for 3 years. The first year he never came home. The second year he came home for 1 week. And the third year he came home for 2 weeks, but he also worked. And then I found out that he ended up cheating. So I was like, we're done. That's when I started really picking up drinking, when we separated. Um, because I had all this trauma to begin with, but now I have a separation. And my ex-husband, I ended up having a peace bond against him because he, was abusive and did stuff that, my kids had seen and shouldn't have. And our youngest, my daughter, was, I think, like 7 or 8 at the time. So we separated in April, and in May I decided I'm going to take a trip out west. That's where my mom and my biological sister ended up moving to Calgary. And I met some friends, and I was like, "Yep, I'm going." So I went. Biggest mistake ever, because that's when I got back into the drugs heavily, into coke. I never thought it was an addiction, um, but I loved it so much that when I came home, I would do it on the weekends the kids weren't gone, and that was pretty much every weekend. I never did it in front of the kids, but I did it, and I'd be coming down off my high on Sundays when they're coming back home. So it was not a good thing, but looking back on it now, it definitely taught me that I was an addict, you know. Um, so then I started doing speed, I did Molly. I mean, you name it, I've done it. I've done every drug out there except for needles. I could never put a needle in to do drugs, right? And drinking was always there. Always constantly drinking. It got to, so I moved here to Truro, Nova Scotia. We separated, sold the house, went on our merry way, kind of thing. Um, and I started picking up drinking. I was still doing coke. Met a few people here. Did coke whenever I could. And then I ended up in a relationship. I'm bisexual, so I ended up in a relationship with a girl. And when we met, she was addicted to weed and I was addicted to coke. And we both agreed that if we're going to make this happen, we're going to quit. So we did. 4 years went by and never touched coke ever. And again, by the end of it, she started smoking weed again. Excuse me. But drinking, that never stopped. It was to the point where we would go out drinking and we'd be intoxicated. We'd come home, and there were nights where I'd come home and I'm like on the floor drunk, and my kids are seeing this. I never thought anything of it. Just thought it was a normal thing. We're having fun. I'm not an alcoholic. I can manage this. I'm in control. It's not controlling me. Anyways, we got engaged. And then COVID hit. So we postponed the wedding to a year later. And then in 2020, I found out she was cheating on me for a whole year uh, with her friend. She just decided she was done with our relationship. And in the meantime, I had a psychosis breakdown where her and my son, I was hiding in the closet and they came in and tried to figure out what was wrong. And I'm like, I don't know. Anyway, I ended up seeing a psychiatrist and I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, PTSD, dissociative disorder, anxiety, and depression. So, hey, whatever. I got mental illness now on top of it. Yay for me, I joined the fire department. I've been on the fire department for 5 years now. But again, social events, I'd go and drink my face off. It was the norm. I was never an angry drunk. I was always the happy, loud, obnoxious, goofy. Everybody loved it when I was drinking because I was just silly, right? Not that I'm not when I'm sober, because I can be, but uh, you know. But anyways, she left and she broke my heart. Um, so my daughter was still living here with me, and I had a hard year. I was heartbroken. I started drinking more and more. So it was, go to work, can't wait to get home because I'm going to have a drink. Go to work, come home, drink. Not 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, till I could feel nothing, till I was numb. During the week, I was pretty good because my daughter lived with me at the time, and I was manageable just to the point where she didn't really see me drunk, right? Last year, so then 2001, I don't want to say sobered up because I never did. I, cut back a bit. But I ended up rising above and buying a house, got a new car. It was great. Got a new job. Awesome. Things were going well. Then I had a really bad car accident. My car was written off. It wasn't my fault. It was somebody else who had T-boned me. I was driving to work and he decided to floor it out of his driveway. And if the road had been icy, he would have driven me off the cliff. So that happened. And I was just, again, now on pills because I'm sore and I damaged my knee, and now I'm taking pills, right? Just to get through the day and drinking during the evening. That was 2001, 2022. Well, so last year, things have been really good. But my sister, who's my best friend, she moved in because her and her husband separated. He's a narcissist and a pedophile, and she found out and she was like, nope, I'm out. What am I going to do? I said, well, you're moving in here. So now it's great. She's moved in. Every Friday, we're drinking. Like, I'm going out and buying not a 6-pack, not an 18-pack, but a 24-pack just for me. And I'd get her some drinks, whatever. But every Friday. And so now I'm at work, love my job, but I'm not really focused because all I want to do is can't wait to get home. I can drink. Can't wait to get home. Friday nights, party night. And also was taking gummies, so weed gummies. So it started off with 2 and then it went to 4 and then it just increased, right? Because, oh heck, they help me relax and I don't feel anything. And so it got to a point where we were drinking and doing the weed. February I met this guy online, lives in Maine. Met him in October, started chatting. Things were great. Went and visited him one weekend in October. Great. Came home, still doing the repetitive drinking, taking the gummies or gel caps or whatever. February 18th, we had a long weekend. So the 18th, 19th, and the 20th was the Monday because it's family day here. So I decided to go visit him in Maine. Big mistake, but anyway, I think it happened for a reason. Had a great time. We end up drinking on the Saturday and started talking about my past and his past, and brought up a lot of past trauma. So anyways, one thing led to another. We had our fun, and then he left. And I was like, what the hell? Like, why don't you stay? Nope, I gotta go home. All right, whatever. Had the bottle there, drank the bottle, and then decided life was shitty. I could care less if I die. What the hell? So I took a whole bottle of pills and I nearly overdosed. I ended up calling 911, and ambulance came with 2 police officers. And I don't really remember a lot of that night, but I remember that I lost my vape, because I vape, in the hotel room. And I remember going crazy. Like, I was literally throwing the bed mattress across the room, throwing shit at these officers, and they're just standing there. And I am surprised that they didn't arrest me, but they just stood there and let me do my thing. I tore that room upside down, like there was crap everywhere. Anyways, I found it, and they wanted to take me in the ambulance, and I refused. I was like, there's no effing way I'm going in there. I don't need help. I'll be fine in the morning. Just leave me the fuck alone. And finally, the one officer was like, okay, if I take you in the back of my cruiser, will you go to the hospital? And I was like, fine, whatever. There's nothing wrong with me. He actually had to help me because I could not walk, because I was so drunk, and now these pills were kicking in, and they wanted to try and get me to the hospital before it put me over the edge. I ended up at the hospital. I am now put on suicide watch. I don't remember much, but I know the next day, which was the Sunday, they had a crisis team come in, and they wanted to keep me inpatient for the week. And I was like, there's no frigging way I'm staying in the States. I gotta get home, I gotta go to work on Tuesday. There's no way you're keeping me here. Well, the only way we can release you. And in the meantime, I was messaging this guy to see if he would come and get me, because I wanted to get out, go back, because the hospital is a half an hour away from where I stayed. I wanted to go back, get my car, get my stuff, and go home. He wouldn't answer. I was like, okay, whatever. So they were like, well, the only way we can release you is if we transport you in the ambulance across the border to St. Stephen's, New Brunswick, and you see a doctor there. I was like, do it up. I'm not staying in this place. There's nothing wrong with me. I need to go back home. Get transported over there. They were like, I played the game pretty good. I got released. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm okay. I got released. I had to walk 10 minutes from the hospital to the border to try and get across to get my stuff. The US border, they wouldn't let me back in because I was already a suicide threat, right? They didn't want me to be back in unless I came with somebody. So the supervisor tried to call this guy. He never answered the phone, blah, blah, blah. My sister, which the border from our house is 4 hours away, she ended up coming down and meeting me at the border. This was now, I don't know, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. And she had to drive down to come get me. 4 hours. Anyways, she came. We ended up getting my car and my stuff. And we didn't stay. We drove home right away. So I didn't get home till the Monday. And that day I was still feeling really low, had a few drinks. And again, tried to kill myself, overdose. And I ended up at the hospital here in town. And that day is when I woke up, I guess, if you want to say, and said, I can't do this shit anymore. I really can't. In the meantime, my oldest son moved out. He has a fiance and they had a baby. We had a falling out, haven't met my grandson in the meantime. So there were a lot of things that were leading up to this. My daughter decided last June to move out to her dad's. Haven't heard from her since then. So I was like, what's the point in life? I've got no purpose here. What's my purpose? So I finally decided, my middle boy lives with me and he was like, Mom, you really need to talk to me. I need to know what's going on. And I'm like, I really don't know what's going on. There's so many things that, that I can't disclose. I can't talk about them. And he's like, why not? I want to help you. I don't understand your mental illness. I want to understand it. I want to help you.
Sounds like a
I,
strong and intelligent young man.
he is. Sorry, I have to stand up. My leg is numb. Um, he is. He's very strong. He works. He's an iron worker. He loves his job. His girlfriend's amazing. Things with them are fantastic. But I have 2 other children and a grandson, and I just thought life was shit. Like, I don't have friends, and like, I have all these mental illnesses. And anyways, in order for me to be released that day from the hospital, the psychiatrist had to come and see me. So she came and she said, you need to be on a mood stabilizer. You have really, really highs and really, really lows. And when you have your lows, you can't get out of them. And I'm like,
I
okay.
take a mood stabilizer. I'm
Yeah. So
bipolar.
yeah, okay. So she ended up putting me on quetiapine, but she over medicated me. So I go home, I'm taking this medication, and all I'm doing is sleeping, and I'm a zombie. And anyways, got in contact with my doctor, and he regulated it now so that I'm okay. But there was one thing in me, and I don't know, I think my dad, to be honest, that day when I was in the hospital, came to visit me in my head, because I could see him in my dreams. And I honestly think that he told me that life's too precious, that I'm not ready for you to be up here with me yet, and you've got to keep going. Because that was, so Tuesday I ended up at home, and Wednesday I ended up calling AA and going to a meeting. And that day since, I've been going to meetings, and I went to an NA meeting, and I go to those too. And I've been clean and sober since then. Since all that happened, I am now making amends to my son, who now is, picked up the phone and called and said, Mom, it's not fair. Jackson hasn't met you. We really want to, smooth things out. Let's talk it over. So that was a week after. all that happened. And now I'm like in my grandson's life. So I really feel that I don't know if it's on my higher power yet, but I feel that my dad was telling me that, you have life to live because of your grandson, because all these things happen. And I fully believe that things happen for reasons. I really do. So, yeah, that's my life in a nutshell. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say it's crazy. It's a life of an addict trying to rebuild what they lost through their addiction.
Absolutely. And I think I've come to the realization I am an addict, whether and an alcoholic, whether it be drugs or alcohol, but I'm the type of person, I have a highly addictive personality. So if I go to the gym once, now I have to go like 100 times. Um, I get addicted very easily, whether it's anything nowadays, you know what I mean? So I have to really, really sit and think, is this really worth
Yeah.
it? And honestly, those friends that I thought were friends were actually only enablers, because not once did I have to buy Coke. It was always handed to me, you know? Um, so now being on this clean, sober journey, I removed a whole lot of people that I thought were friends. They're no longer in my life. I don't need them. Um, I wish them well, don't get me wrong. However, I cannot have those type of people in my life, you know. And it's funny because you really, really, truly find out who your real friends are when you go through this. So, yeah,
So let me ask you one
yeah,
last question. Do
sure.
you have any advice for people watching and listening?
Honestly, I just want to tell people that they're not alone. There are a lot of us out there that are struggling and going through things. And if they think that they drink too much or use drugs too much, then they need to reach out, because honestly, there won't be a next time. And I know for me, if I pick up one drink, there will not be a next time. I will be 6 feet under. I know that for a fact, because I know myself now, being clean and sober. um, and honestly, don't be ashamed. I was at first, but now I really don't give shit. You know what? I'm here today because I took the action and I took the accountability of being powerless and unmanageable. So, you know what? Just reach out. There's always somebody there to listen.
Well, I want to say thank you for coming on the podcast. I think you did great today.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And if it's just for one person that I can reach out to, then my job here is done.
And I think you'll be able to accomplish that with no problem.
I really appreciate it, Jim.
No problem. So do me a favor and just hang tight for a minute. Let me do our little sales pitch for the group.
Okay.
Everyone watching and listening, if you like what you saw and heard, go below and give us a like. Also, subscribe to see when we upload new videos. You can also check us out on all social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, TikTok, Instagram. I always say if you name it, we're on it. I also suggest checking out our website, which is www.addicts-anonymous.com. There you find plenty of free resources and free literature. And also, Addicts Anonymous has a book coming out. It should be hopefully out by next month. I keep pushing the release date back, so I will keep you guys updated on that when it is going to be available for sale. So that's all we have for today. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. And until next time.